waited to make this video as long as I could because I wanted that Lex Luthor casting to really complete the picture. But alas, it looks like DC Studios and James Gunn couldn't get a deal done before the actors' strike. And now that that's in play, it seems like it'll be quite a while before we get a Lex Luthor. Who am I pulling for? Well, I haven't heard about any frontrunners myself, but the trade said that Alexander Skarsgård was one of them, and he would be my choice. I think he would help this movie a lot out of the choices that we've heard. I'm not saying there's not an exciting choice coming out of left field, and I kind of to some degree maybe hope there is, but I would be happy with Alexander Skarsgård. So today, in this video, I'm going to rank the casting for Superman Legacy so far. And as always, I invite you to play along down below in the comments. And to keep it positive, I'm going from best to worst. And I would advise you do the same. A lot of you are like, can't we be positive with DC? And so I'm going to really try and do that and keep our options open, except for the few ideas that just seem just so bad. All right, so first, though, I want to go over some tea, which I think helps make Superman Legacy go down a little bit easier. Because during the week, when all these rando DC superheroes starting to be cast for the film, like many of you, I was getting worried. I was like, what are all these people doing in a Superman solo movie? So I went to my source and I said, what the heck is going on here? And here's what I found out, as I tweeted the other day. So it turns out that the Authority being in this movie was a clever misdirect. It is very clever. Gunn put the Authority in the information that goes out to casting directors because he knows that that's where a lot of leaks come from. Those grids, they're called grids. They have characters that are being cast, and they also have a description of the movie. And so a lot of that leaks and goes out, and that's where a lot of scoops come from. So Gunn put the Authority in that casting breakdown. But what it really meant, as you can see, was a new team of more traditional DC superheroes, potentially based on the Terrifics and other fringe comics that some of you have pointed out, the kind of comic that would really appeal to James Gunn. And it was a very clever misdirect, but some of you have asked, I think understandably, does that mean that the Authority solo movie is maybe not happening? Was that also just part of the misdirection? I'm not sure about that. I think that while this is a clever way to avoid leaks, I don't know if using actual comic book teams with fans is the way to go. Because while, again, it's a great fake out, it could leave a bad taste for those fans who are like, oh, I thought I was getting my favorite characters. And they're like, nope, but thanks. Thanks for helping to keep the secret. So the actual story is that Superman, while younger here, is already a very established superhero. And when a conflict arises in the Middle East, he disagrees with other superheroes. I don't know to what level he disagrees, but there's a disagreement on how that conflict should be handled. And at the same time, Lex Luthor is trying to negotiate his own peace terms between the two countries that are having a conflict to show that he actually is the most powerful and can get it done when superheroes, including Superman, cannot. So first, let's look at this setup from a creative perspective, and then we'll look at it from a business perspective. All right, so creatively, I think it works. James Gunn has said that Superman is a multifaceted character who has a life both at the Daily Planet and, with the world of superheroes, the Justice League. I don't know if the Justice League will already be formed in this movie or not, but that's what he's talking about. And this storyline would not only highlight that, but bring those two worlds together, because surely the Daily Planet would be covering a conflict in the Middle East, and Lois Lane, their star reporter, would likely be handling that story. Heck, maybe Clark Kent is too, which would put him on the scene in both his personas, journalist and superhero. That's pretty cool. As I know this is a lot like Batman v Superman. We're going to get to the similarities in the business section. Now, as for Lex Luthor, this also fits his character, from wanting to best Superman and prove that humans can take care of themselves to his political ambitions in the comics. He was President Luthor, which is very, very ripped from the headlines these days, quite frankly. So in the real world, many politicians and even aspiring politicians have made peace in the Middle East a prime objective, as it has been seen as an impossible goal, which everybody wants to achieve, and therefore some have taken it on. They see it as a challenge. And so I think Luthor kind of fits that setup. Now, this wouldn't actually be the Israeli-Palestine conflict. I believe it'll be between two fictional countries in the Middle East. I heard dictators, which DC has already established in canon. They have plenty of fake Middle East countries. But I do think that why else would James Gunn choose that region, the Middle East, if he didn't want to draw parallels to what is, again, considered the biggest stalemate in history and a real-life problem that everyone would like to see solved. All right, so let's consider this on that note from a business perspective. This might be an interesting idea, but is it a good one? Especially for a four quadrants doesn't really cover it anymore, for something that's supposed to have mass global appeal. When I first tweeted out this scoop, a lot of you were on it, and you had some very good points, two of them in particular. One was that, despite Superman comics in the past telling a similar story like this, but that was a while ago. They put a lot of politics and global politics in some Superman stories. Today, I don't really think anybody wants to see Superman, a white American superhero, try to solve problems in the Middle East. Or probably, if played by Alexander Skarsgård, a white American or white blonde or redheaded American or European businessman either. And then building on that, some of you also said, well, hey, if this is a world already full of superheroes, aren't there any superheroes in the Middle East that can take care of this? That was a point in Black Adam, by the way. The people of Kandak really wanted to handle their situation themselves instead of having outsiders trying to come in. And I thought that was one of the better points of the film. I liked that part of Black Adam, even if the execution was not great. Maybe Superman will suggest this, but then why would he sideline himself in his own movie? So on that note, as many of you pointed out, this does sound a lot like Black Adam. Especially also, I think the casting choices double down on that. And then it sounds a little bit like Wonder Woman 1984 as well, which people also had a problem with. That region is really tricky, especially when you're coming from the outside of it. Also, is this what fans want from a solo Superman movie? The Batman worked great because it was very much a Batman story. It was, in fact, in my opinion, the Batmaniest story or movie ever, aside from the animated series. I loved it. His villains, his supporting cast, his city. By making Superman Legacy a film that largely takes place outside of Metropolis, I get that Superman is a global character. But, let's see. All right, so with multiple, you can still find a way to do that. Hijack. I don't know if you've seen Hijack. We'll talk about Idris Elba. Hijack is a phenomenal show on Apple TV. And this is one of the best global shows I've ever seen that manages not to politicize it. It's just a story about people, and it's a global spanning adventure, and I absolutely adored it, and that is really well done. So you could tell a Superman story where he fights like Brainiac or somebody on a global scale, and then that would honor the global aspect to a character like Superman without entrenching it and so deep in politics. So anyway, a Superman story that takes place largely outside of Metropolis with multiple other DC superheroes and a real-world villain. Oh, careful calling real-world groups villains, James Gunn. That might be, I think that could be potentially intellectually interesting. Again, I think this sounds like the kind of movie that some hardcore DC fans will defend, like myself, and be like, but it's, I can see where he's coming from intellectually. And everybody else commercially is like, no thanks, that is not what I was looking for in a Superman film. The Flash, for instance, had a lot of cameos, as did Black Adam, but audiences just weren't interested. But again, as I said, a specific Batman story, fans ate it up, just like they ate up the Joker, which was also, specific to its mythology. I get that James Gunn might be trying to hit the ground running, and recent MCU movies have certainly had lots of guest stars. However, one, the MCU is having a lot of trouble right now, so they might not want to do that either. And two, when you're building a new cinematic universe, the audience needs time to get its bearing with the solo movies. That's how the MCU itself was built. I think that's why the Batman worked so well. You were like, oh, we're in a new world, and you ease the audience into it. I think dropping them into the deep end, particularly when a lot of these characters are going to be new to the people who like Batman and Superman, they're going to be like, who are these other characters? I'm checking out. That's my concern. Now, on that note, if Superman Legacy feels like a fun DC video game, I can see DC fans like myself geeking out hardcore, be like, oh, this is pretty neat. But again, regular moviegoers, I think they'll just find it jarring and they'll be lost, which again is why I think The Flash and Black Adam partially might have had the difficulties that they did. Not to say they didn't have plenty of other issues, but that might have been one of them. And then, particularly when you're telling a Batman and Superman story, these are characters and worlds that are so ingrained in even the most casual of fans, thanks to decades of TV and movies already based on the comics. And DC, it's not fair. Marvel has lucked out that their comics weren't as well known. But DC, because it's been in the mainstream longer, it has to deal with expectations. And I worry about the expectations not being met, particularly for characters like Batman and Superman. So Superman Legacy is also looking very much like a James Gunn movie. And I think while some of you will be like, oh yeah, that's awesome, I think that some of us had hoped that he was going to level up here and he was going to create something that had, certainly some of his better qualities that he brings to the table, but also kind of brought him up to a new level as a filmmaker. You want it to feel fresh and different, not just Superman in a James Gunn style film. Because he promised that Superman and Lois were going to be the leads, but this still is starting to look very much like a Guardians of the Galaxy, the Suicide Squad, and Peacemaker, from the casting to the characters that he's choosing. A lot of quirky. And Superman might be an island in a sea of quirkiness, but I don't really know if that works for Superman, quite frankly. Superman is a very traditional character, and I think that's kind of what people might want to see from a story that is a Superman story. So now, not only does it have the same vibe, but it also mirrors James Gunn's more recent turn towards strong commentary, be it political in the Suicide Squad or about animal cruelty and just basic rights in general for animals and humans in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And please note, I thought that commentary was quite good. I thought that the scene between Flag and Peacemaker in the Suicide Squad was the best scene in the movie. I thought that was fantastic. And I really very much liked Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, as many of you know. But in both those cases, the commentary was secondary. It was a little bit close to the main street, to the center of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and for a minute there, it looked like it was going to hurt the film. But the film was so strong that it managed to overcome it. But in Superman Legacy, it seems like this strong commentary is becoming more central to the plot. And even if it's done really well, I do have some concern as to whether or not it'll hurt its ability to make a ton of money. Especially because again, as I said, it's trying to navigate the Middle East, and that is a really difficult discussion to navigate, again, particularly when you're coming from outside of it. I really hope that they're not done casting. I hope they bring in some Muslim characters here. That's going to be crucial for this type of story. All right, let's rank the castings, okay? So we've talked about the setup. Now you know what's going on, basically. So let's rank the castings. And as I said, in an effort to keep it positive, I'm going from best to worst. So who's my favorite casting so far? It's actually quite easy. For me, it's Anthony Carrigan as Metamorpho. Fans love Carrigan, myself included. I love this guy. His star has really risen thanks to his brilliant work on Barry. Emmy nominated, thank you very much. But before that, he won over a lot of DC fans, again, myself included, with his fantastic work as Victor Zsasz on Gotham. Of course, this character wasn't comics accurate at all. When we first saw him, we were like, that's not Victor Zsasz. But Carrigan was so charismatic, we ended up not caring. We were like, this guy's phenomenal. He hasn't done any Marvel work, and he's relatively new to most people. He's on the cusp of superstardom, so Gunn is getting him at just the right time. Also, while he's a great fit with Gunn's style, Gunn has never worked with him before, so this seems like a fresh pairing. Oh, I love it! But Metamorpho, well, Carrigan again has proven he's the star and can make any character work. And also, look how great Polka Dot Man turned out to be. This could be similarly great. And of course, Metamorpho can create kryptonite. He can create a kryptonite arm, kryptonite gas, all kinds of stuff. But as a hero himself in the comics, although to be fair, sometimes he's a wild card, sometimes he's misunderstood or confused. But I mean, will he really go up against Superman? So what would he need the kryptonite for? All right, number 2, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane. How is she not my number 1? Well, I'm a little nervous. Here's why. Nobody watches Mrs. Maisel, even though it's a fabulous show. I love that show. It just wrapped. Just finished its 5 seasons. But whatever's keeping most people from watching Mrs. Maisel, I'm worried it might keep them from watching Superman Legacy. What is the failure to connect here? Brosnahan is a little past the cusp of superstardom. After all the awards she won for Maisel years ago, early on in the show's run, You'd think her star would have taken off by now, but she still comes across as a fresh and exciting choice. If she's likable in the role, Mrs. Maisel sometimes was frustrating, although to be fair, that was often due to the writing. Just the Mrs. Maisel character. Everybody else, that's a great show. If you've not watched Mrs. Maisel and you want to become familiar with Rachel Brosnahan's work, I highly recommend you check it out. I love that show. But if she really clicks in the role, I think James Gunn will get a lot of points with women and feminist allies for casting her. I just hope she doesn't play the character exactly as Mrs. Maisel. I don't want to be like, oh, look, it's a crossover with Mrs. Maisel. I want her Lois Lane to be a unique, new character that she creates. She apparently knocked her audition out of the park, but maybe James Gunn just really likes Mrs. Maisel too. Let's see. I'm excited about this casting, but I'm also nervous. I'm nervous about it. All right, number 3, David Corenswet as Superman. Is this an exciting choice? Not to me. It's an okay choice. It's a safe choice. A lot of fans love Corenswet for the role because they feel he looks like Superman. Because just because he had that curl, they were like, oh, Superman. And if I were an agent for another actor, I'd be like, let's take you to the salon and get them to put a to put that curl in your hair. But, he also looks a little bit like Henry Cavill, and we'll see if that's a good or bad thing. Fans might be like, he reminds me of a Superman I loved. Or they might be like, why didn't you just keep Henry Cavill? Who, by the way, would have fit with Rachel Brosnahan. All right, he is also a good fit with Robert Pattinson's Batman, which is why when I did a Superman casting video for the Matt Reeves verse, Corenswet was on my list. And by the way, Robert Pattinson's Batman, he will have his own sequel coming out the exact same year. So they will seem like a set. Only problem is they're not in the same universe, because Matt Reeves said no. So James Gunn has planned to introduce his own older Batman down the line, which makes absolutely no sense. But this is what we're working with. I think that Corenswet will look good as Superman, but what about his Clark Kent? That's as important a role to get right. I mean, we've seen a lot of Batman actors not do a great Bruce Wayne, and that has had an impact. And when they do a great Bruce Wayne, you can see the difference it makes. And Clark Kent is a humorous role. Can Corenswet do humor? We'll find out. I know James Gunn can write that role, but how can Corenswet deliver it? Again, I'm nervous. Number 4, Edi Gathegi as Mr. Terrific. This is a wink at fans, giving Gathegi another shot after he was treated so poorly in X-Men First Class. And I'm sure he's a fine actor. But this is how Mr. Terrific looked in a recent comic, so maybe you might understand why I didn't think this was good casting. And by the way, this comic was written, it was Strange Adventures, and Mr. Terrific was a big supporting character in it. And this is written by Tom King, who was part of James Gunn's new group of writers, so he might have even suggested Mr. Terrific, but I don't know why he wasn't like, here's how he was drawn in my recent comic, and all the fans loved it. I think he should look like this. Now, I get that Gunn might want to play up that Mr. Terrific's mind is his biggest power. He's supposed to be on the level of Batman. But what I see is the loss of a proper beefcake superhero, a diverse one who can compete with all the others that are established for popularity. To me, this should have been Idris Elba, speaking of Idris Elba. I don't even care that he already worked with Gunn, in DC, by the way. I don't care. He's so perfect for the role, and it would finally give him the opportunity that we've wanted for him. I would just love to see it. But if they want to go younger, although I think Gathegi is closer to Idris Elba's age, but what about Damson Idris that everybody's been talking about? Point is, Mr. Terrific should be played by a leading man type, not a character actor type. And Mr. Terrific could turn out great in this movie, but he still don't have the ability to rise to compete with other mainstream superheroes, and that's a shame. That's a real lost opportunity. All right, number 5, Isabela Merced is Hawkgirl. Now, she's playing the Kendra Saunders version of the character. Who? Yeah, a lot of us aren't familiar with her character, although she is about to get her own solo comic from DC. They're about to launch that. But here's the problem. Just like with Green Lanterns, everybody can talk about all the Green Lanterns they want, but everybody today who is a DC fan knows the Justice League animated series, and they want Jon Stewart. Just like we all want Shiera Hall, and that's just the end of it. I don't care if you say, well, this is a different Hawkgirl. Everyone's going to be like, well, it's not the Hawkgirl I wanted. Also, unfortunately, Merced has been in some real stinkers. Transformers, the upcoming Madam Web, my goodness. And she was Dora the Explorer, and who doesn't love a glow-up? but she's also 5'1". I think it's hard for me to imagine her playing Hawkgirl. I mean, maybe we'll all be pleasantly surprised, but I think that this is the most Black Adam level casting for this movie so far, and it just pulls the film down from seeming like an A-list type of film. Then finally, dead last, that's right, number 6, Nathan Fillion is Guy Gardner, the jerkiest of the Green Lanterns, who makes a lot of jokes. Oh boy. So all I can see here is longtime pals Gunn and Fillion continuing to pal around together, amusing themselves more than they amuse us. Gunn has already said he can't wait to put Fillion in Gardner's bowl cut. But you know what? Guy Gardner has fans, and he hasn't had that bowl cut for a long time. So I'd be careful about making just a straight joke out of Guy Gardner. Because, again, as I said, some people really like him. Some people, he's their favorite Green Lantern. So you want to make sure that they feel good about it. And we're never getting rid of Fillion, because James Gunn clarified that Nathan Fillion will play Guy Gardner wherever he might show up in the new DCU, including maybe on that Green Lantern show. So that's frustrating. It's just too stunt casting. Nathan Fillion is far beyond the cusp of stardom. He already had his shot multiple times, and mainstream audiences weren't impressed beyond the scope of television. That's right, he's a very successful television actor, but that also pulls down the project. He had Castle, now The Rookie. I mean, if you want to give him a cameo, I guess it can't be helped because Gunn has done that countless times before with Fillion. But a major recurring role? That makes me nervous. Of all the casting, Nathan Fillion makes this seem the most like just another James Gunn movie instead of, again, something new and exciting. Also, Nathan Fillion aggressively defended Joss Whedon just last year after all the really bad stuff came out and was corroborated. So, seems like a lot of trouble for very little in return. All right, so that's my breakdown of Superman Legacy so far. What do you think? Share your thoughts and own rankings down below, and of course, subscribe. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.